to lesson 1.1. Today we're going to do a very basic introduction of chemistry. For a long time, we've known or we believed that matter is composed of atoms. In fact, the word atoms comes from the Greek word atomos, which means uncuttable. We do know now that atoms have smaller particles. They're composed of smaller particles. But as technology improved, we could make more and more discoveries about the atom. This next slide shows a picture of electrons underneath a scanning tunneling microscope, and actually it's the cesium atom in this picture. I'm just using electrons to see the cesium atoms and how they're bounced off. So that's the point of what our technology is now. We know that the pieces of matter do not behave like the objects that we see. So for example, if you have a wooden pencil in front of you, that wooden pencil behaves a certain way, but the atoms that it's composed of do not necessarily behave the same way the pencil does. You don't feel vibration in the pencil, the atoms themselves are vibrating. In the macroscopic world, that's what we know. We know the macroscopic world is what we can experience with our senses. And so what we have to do in order to study chemistry is we have to understand the connection between the macroscopic world, what we experience with our senses, and the microscopic world. Critical thinking question. You can stop on this and talk about it if you'd like, but we're going to move on. Configuration of atoms. Properties of substances can be determined by the way in which atoms are organized in that substance. So if you look, for example, at the water molecule is organized with the oxygen atom and with two hydrogen atoms attached to it, and because of the way this is formed, then it has a polarity to it, which makes water a polar solvent. And so because it's organized that way, it behaves that way. Some basic organization is just simple in the fact that every water molecule has one oxygen and two hydrogens. When we pass an electric current through that water, and what it does is it decomposes the water into its substituents, which are oxygen and hydrogen. Please note that, and we'll talk about this again later, that these elements are naturally diatomic. So when they're in their elemental form, they will be O2 and H2. Another thing we'll learn as we move through chemistry is that you have to balance equations because matter can be neither created nor destroyed. And so when we balance that equation, we have to make sure the atoms on one side are equivalent to the atoms on the other side. So on the left-hand side, the reactant side, we have two oxygen atoms. Those two oxygen atoms, after having electric current pass through the water, actually form an O2 molecule, and then the hydrogens, there's four of those, and they form two H2 molecules. So basically, the fundamental concepts of chemistry, the very, very basics of chemistry, matter is composed of various types of atoms. You see that from the periodic table. There are now 118 designated atoms on that periodic table, and by reorganizing the way they're attached, we get all of those possibilities in the world. So there may be 118 atoms, but there are millions of compounds in our world. That concludes lesson 1.1, and we will move on to lesson 1.2.